Good morning, students. Today we are going to read some key terms in the topic of metals in the subject of chemistry O levels. So concentrate yourself. These are some very important key terms. So we are going to start. Metals are often worked, reshaped when hot, as they are then softer and easier to work. However, metals can be cold worked or forced into new shapes without being heated. Eventually, cold working makes metals work hardened and difficult to reshape because more force is required, more effort is required to reshape the metal in cold state. The forces applied to work the metal produce large number of the dislocations. Movement of the dislocations become difficult because a large number of the dislocations are trying to move in different directions. The metal eventually reaches a state where the dislocations cannot move and the grains cannot change shape without risk of breaking. So this is called work hardened. So when you work on the metal in the cold state, a lot of the dislocations occurred into different directions. So metal is always easy to work in hot state. Next thing that we are going to read is recovery. By heating the work hardened metal, it is possible to give its atoms enough energy to move out of their dislocations and to rearrange within the grains. So by heating the worked hardened metal, it is possible to give its atoms enough energy to move out of their dislocations and to rearrange within the grains. This heat treatment is called recovery or stress relief. The next thing that we are going to read is recrystallization. By heating a work hardened metal to a high enough temperature, it can be made to recrystallize as numerous fine grains. The temperature at which this happens is called the recrystallization temperature. Next thing that we are going to read is annealing. Work hardened metals can be restored to their original state by a treatment called annealing. So, work hardened metals can be restored to their original state by a treatment called annealing. The work hardened metal objects is put into a furnace and left until both recovery and recrystallizations are complete. The metal regains its malleability and ductility and can be worked again. When a metal is shaped by cold working, it may need to be annealed several times during the process because again and again a lot of dislocations will occur in different directions. So when a metal is shaped by cold working, it may be need to annealed several times during the process. Each time, work hardening makes the metal too hard for further cold working. It goes into the annealing furnace. The next thing that we are going to read is hot working. In a hot working or forging, a metal is worked at a temperature above its recrystallization temperature. In this way, annealing is taking place while the metal is working. Forging requires less force than cold working because the metal is softer because of the high heat temperature. It has the advantage that there is no need to break off for annealing. The next thing that we are going to read is quenching and tempering. Quenching is a sudden immersion of a hot metal in oil or water at room temperature. It is an important treatment for cutting tools, including the swords already mentioned. Many crystalline materials, including metals, can change from one crystalline form into another on heating or cooling. The austenite form of steel, which exists at high temperatures, can hold more carbon than the ferrite form, which exists at low temperatures. When steel is quenched rapidly, the carbon atoms do not have enough time to move, and the austenite form with its higher carbon content persists at the lower temperatures. The carbon atoms interfere with the movement of the dislocations, making the metal harder, less malleable, and more brittle. Quenched steel is too brittle for many uses, and to make it less brittle, some hardness must be sacrificed. To obtain a balance between malleability and hardness, the steel is tempered. So concentrate now. The metal object is heated a second time to the tempering temperature and then quenched again. The temperature at which the steel is worked must not be above the tempering temperature. The next thing that we are going to read in the lecture is recycling scrap iron. This you have read in many times in your previous classes and in O levels as well. So concentrate, this is very easy. There are three main types of this scrap. The first kind is called capital scrap, and this is all the rusty old iron and steel objects that have finished their useful lives and are cluttering up the countryside. The second type of the scrap is called circulating scrap, and this is made in the iron and steel works itself. So when iron and steel works are there, this kind of the second type is formed. Up to 27% of the iron made in the plant is scrap and is recycled. The last type of the scrap is called process scrap and is produced in industry. So this is formed in iron and steel work. The next type is process scrap that is produced in industry. And the first type was almost useless because the iron has done all its life almost. The car industry buys in steel to make cars, and 10% of this metal becomes scrap. The last two kinds of the scrap are best for steel making because they do not contain such a wide range of the impurities as the capital scrap that comes from all sorts of the places. Greater and greater efforts are being made to collect and recycle scrap metals of all kinds. Recycling scrap metal has other advantages apart from just reducing the amount of the ore that has to be mined. Recycling means that less energy is needed to make new metals. The ore and the coke do not have to be transported, and less coke is needed because the scrap is richer in metal than ore, having already been reduced. So effort and money will be less spent because that is already reduced, and that is actually the cutting of the original metal that is now scrap after working in the industry or after working in the iron and steel works. Less pollution is produced because less coke is burned. So here is another advantage. Less pollution is produced because less coke is burned and less fuel is used in the transport. This means less sulfur and nitrogen oxide and dust in the atmosphere. Finally, collecting and recycling scrap means that there is less metal rubbish lying around and landscape. So this is another advantage. So as much scrap iron as possible is added to the iron from the blast furnace and the mixture is converted into steel. So this was the topic, students. Read this lecture again carefully, understand it, learn it, and make your notes. Thank you so much.